Okay, everybody, for this one, we're going to go over the topic of Iran and the relations with them. Now, most people think with that one is it goes back to the late 70s, which is for the U.S., which is frankly not true. This one is a lot farther before then, and if people would understand that it actually goes back previously, that we've been intervening in their politics since way back into the 1950s, they would understand that frankly is you would understand what happened in the blowout in the hostage crisis in the late 70s. It's not actually that Iran was the aggressors there. It's actually that what happened was it was blowback from what we were doing. Essentially, what we were doing was we were choosing their leader. Anytime they choose a leader, we would put in the Shah as our leader for them because we did not trust them to choose their own leader. Now, if you flip the shoes around for us, if they would have done the same for us, we would have reacted in the same way, and we would have taken their people here at an embassy in the same way, because we would have felt that we would have been completely backstabbed in any type of relations. We wouldn't have taken that lightly, that they keep either assassinating or exiling our leaders away from the country anytime we try to elect a leader. Now, it doesn't matter if you like their leader or not. Any country is allowed to pick their own leader that they choose. It doesn't matter if it's a poor choice or not. I mean, to me, I felt that our country has chosen a lot of poor leaders in the past, and it doesn't mean that you get to go off and kill them or exile them to another country. That I feel that another country could do the same thing with it just because they don't like them. That's not the way things go. We don't have, no country has the right to basically kill another country's leader just because they don't like them. That's not how things work in this world. You choose your leader, you have to kind of deal with the leaders in the country. This is the way things go in foreign policy if you do actually deal with the ideas of foreign policy, not trying to create this idealistic visionary of foreign policy. It's not how things work. And this is what a lot of people in Washington, D.C. have not grasped yet. I mean, they've gone through well over 100 years and haven't even gotten that idea. That you can't just kill people and expect no blowback, and you can't create this ideal vision of the world. It's not going to happen. You're going to have to deal with people you don't like, and this is what happens in a normal day. You have to deal with people you don't like, and it happens on the global scale as well. There's going to be leaders that you don't like. There's going to be leaders that are not exactly the nicest of people, but you're going to have to deal with it. People choose their own leaderships, and that's what's going to happen. Now, when it comes to Iran, what they had with it was basically is they were essentially choosing moderate leaders, but essentially when they got to the point of having their leaders executed and exiled to other countries, they got to the point to where they felt they needed a strong man, and that's where this Ayatollah system came in. And what we saw now is, now that they have a strong man in there, it led to the point to where they could get to the point to where the U.S. was more likely to respect them for and be able to leave them alone for this decision. Now the U.S. is going on the idea of basically of teaching the idea of history starts in the late 70s with Iran, and not showing that it actually started well before. The late 70s is only the midpoint of the history with Iran. We actually had a positive relationship with them well before. Now, the fact is we even had, since that point, we've even had points where we've been positive in trade with them. Now, we only cut trade with them recently during the Bush administration, and this was over Netanyahu basically spouting his mouth, stating that they're going to have a nuclear weapon and then they're going to blow up the world. Well, that kind of cascades into the next point. If you look at a map of all of the bases around them, essentially they're surrounded by both Sunni Arab, which is, since they're Shia Arab, they're essentially considered to be an enemy. They're surrounded by Sunni Arab and Israeli and U.S. Military bases all around their country. This means that they're essentially in serious grave danger if they do not defend themselves. This is why they actually have military bases there and that they're seriously armed. It's not because they're looking to start a war, but actually for the reason that they do not want to actually be obliterated off the face of the earth because of what they're surrounded by. You also have the fact that when you look at history, it's not Shia Islam but Sunni Islam that's very imperialistic. When you have your country surrounded around by a lot of Sunni Islamic nations that are actually armed to the T with weapons, even nuclear weapons, you have to get to the point to where you need to be able to fend them off. And this is a very, very dangerous thing when you have the U.S. and Israel who are aligned with these nations, and it makes it very, very difficult to defend yourself at that point. So you're essentially surrounded around groups that are very, very imperialistic, and it makes it very difficult to actually defend yourself, especially when you get groups that essentially want to steal your oil. And this is really what it's about. They want to channel over to Europe. And essentially Iran and Syria, Syria being Iran's ally, are essentially getting in that way. If you look at an actual map, you would see that this is a major channel. Now, when you look at this whole thing, you would see that basically this has become a very, very big issue. Even Israel has been seen drilling for oil illegally in Syrian land. And this is what has caused a lot of conflict between Syria and Israel, and why Israel wants to still launch war with Syria, because they feel that if they can launch war with Syria, that if they can take over part of it, that they can actually get actually part of the oil fields. And that's really what it boils down to. And this is where we're sitting at with it. It's not that Iran is actually an aggressor to any such standard. It's more that they're actually surrounded by a bunch of aggressors. Now, why do they have a lot of these chants of death to America is really for the fact that America's put a lot of strain on them politically. And that's not exactly going to make them fans of our country. Now, this is actually death to America as a political system, not necessarily for the people, because we've heard plenty of stories from people who have actually gone out there, who have actually displayed their experiences on YouTube and other social networking sites, where the actual story is completely different from what is displayed on the news. What the legacy media displays as their experiences of saying death to America, they're saying they're trying to make it look like they're saying about citizens. It's actually not about the citizens. When it comes down to the actual citizens, it's completely different. They actually do not have negative feelings toward the citizens, because you will see a lot of stories of citizens going out there and then being very, very hospitable toward the citizens, because they don't feel these negative feelings toward them. They realize that there's a difference between the actual government and the actual people, as they are not exactly stupid. These aren't people that are exactly stupid, as you're talking. They're the only Islamic country to actually produce Nobel Prize winners in the region. Aside from the Israel, we're talking, and every other nation has been a part of the whole Nobel Prize winning process. I mean, you've never heard of any Sunni Islamic country ever winning a Nobel Prize. except for the fact is when they try to give wrongfully give them for like something like a peace prize for something that was really wrongfully, such as the White Helmets, when the White Helmets were actually linked to terrorist groups. When if you actually did real investigations, you would have actually found this one out. But I digress in that one. But this is something that if we look actually at Iran, we have to go back to Persia. Persia was actually never an imperialistic nation. The reason why Persia fell was for a couple of reasons. Number one was they essentially went from a gold standard down to a silver standard and down to a fiat currency. This fiat currency, as we see, always fails countries. If this is what failed the Roman Empire copied the same thing. They went from a gold standard down to a silver standard down to a fiat currency. Every country that goes down to a fiat currency fails, because eventually you get to the point of saying, hey, we can print as much as we want, and eventually you get to being a very, very lazy, non-productive nation, and you don't generate any more wealth, you only generate debt. And after this point, you're going to end up finishing with nothing else, and you're going to go bankrupt. And eventually you're just going to have to give up land. Now, eventually, with it, what happened with Persia was that's what happened. They ended up having to kind of concede a little bit of land, and then eventually, what happened with the Treaty of Versailles is they lost even more land when they actually got all the Middle East end up getting carved up because of the fear of Russia becoming a trade power within the Middle Eastern region. And that's why we saw with what happened there. But when we see the Iran is not an imperialistic nation. It's not looking to grow. So when they're talking about a Shia crescent, the Shia crescent is really only for the fact that these nations have already existed there. There is no actual Shia crescent beyond what was naturally there. It's more that you're seeing that a rescinding of Sunni Islam that should never have been there to begin with. That's really what we're seeing. It's not necessarily a development of a Shia crescent, but more of a rescinding of Sunni Islam, and that's been caused by an actual retreating from the actual loss of a second caliphate in the last, I would say, 100 years or so. And this is what we're seeing. And it's not the fact that we're seeing anything developed by Shia Islam, but more that Sunni Islam is starting to retreat in the region. And the fact that since Sunni Islam is more migrating toward Europe, this has caused them to lose a lot of their people that would have normally lived in those regions as well. So the regions are just being filled up by the people who would normally be there. So it is nothing out of the normal situation that would be there, with the vacuum just being open for just spreading through the space. It's not something that's from terrorism or imperialism. It's just from the space being open and the space is being filled naturally through this dispersion. That's what's really going on there. Because if it were really something like they were actually really spreading, they would actually be spreading further and further throughout the region, and they were trying to be imperialistic. They would actually be trying to spread throughout the Levant if they were actually trying to do something, do damage throughout the region, and actually looking to do something damaging, as opposed to actually just filling out the region. And since we're seeing that they're not actually trying to take over countries, they're not actually doing anything militarily beyond just defense, this is really kind of disputed. I mean, you can have neoconservatives like Netanyahu and John Bolton keep stating that this is the case and they're a big threat, but the fact is they're not. Netanyahu stated that they're going to become a huge nuclear threat and they're going to be dropping a nuclear bomb since the late 1980s, but the fact is they have not done anything with any type of nuclear threat, and this is, 30 years later? We've gone through 30 years, and they have not made one nuclear threat. We've had many of things happen since the late 1980s. Since then, that have actually been bigger threats since then, and they've been completely ignored. Yet these two morons are still going on about Iran, which is not even a threat. They don't even have an actual serious air force. They don't even have access to serious commercial airliners to actually do much, to actually travel. What's actually going on is that you're totally ignoring serious threats that are actually around the area, like Saudi Arabia, like Israel. Israel is actually causing threats in the region and actually making the U.S. Essentially battle it out for what they're essentially causing by running their mouth and dropping bombs on regions that are non-confrontational. And this is where we need to actually look at and realize that really we have no dog in the fight in the area, and that Iran is really no threat. And essentially, if we pull out of the region, we need to realize that basically what we have basically Sunni Islam that's essentially a serious threat. Globally, we need to keep an eye on them, but we don't have to be in the region to do that. All we have to do is watch our own properties, and we need to tell Israel that they're on their own and to stop running their mouths. And we're not going to defend them anymore, because this is basically it, and we need to say that we're not going to basically defend a country that's going to drag us into war, and then whenever we need help, they're nowhere to be found. That's basically Israel for you. Israel is really basically the Jewish version of Pakistan. And that's really the way they need to be told off as. They're a nuclear state that basically, that they want money. They always want money. They're a nuclear state. They anytime they don't get money, they whine and they'll scream about how bad America is. And whenever they get their money with it, they're saying, yeah, America. But and you'll have people in the Washington, D.C. area that say we need to give them their money. But then, but the fact is they're told that they're supposed to be a strategic ally, but really in reality, they aren't anywhere close. They're actually probably the biggest foe out there. And this is what really needs to be said. And really, when it comes to Iran, Iran is really neither a foe nor a friend with it. They're really more of like what could be considered as a trade partner. They're probably the only country out there with really any goods they could be traded for. They have oil, they have pistachios, they have other different goods and services that they can offer us, while no other country in the area has anything. Every other country in the area has garbage and basically deals in problems, or is probably right now not exactly in the state that we can deal with. So if we want to deal with anybody right now, it would probably be Iran, but it would be as a trade partner only. Every other country in the region is not worth dealing with. And that's what we need to realize. Every other country is basically, every dollar we put in is going to be used for potential terrorism. Even Israel. Israel's basically linked up with countries like Saudi Arabia. So when you get a country linked with them, you know that they're going to be doing the same thing. You got to think that they did not blink an eye when Jamal Khashoggi was murdered in the Turkey embassy. So when out in Turkey, so when you had a journalist who was actually killed by Saudi Arabia, and they did not even blink an eye when other countries were talking about pulling weaponry from it, and they said we're not even going to even consider pulling weaponry from them. That should show you a big thing about them, that they're more interested in basically getting money than they are on actual ethics, and that basically that they are linked financially to terrorism, and they really don't care. And this is what we should really, really think about this nation. We should not view them actually as a peaceful nation, but a nation linked to terrorism. And if we look at them, we should look at them as problematic. We should not look at Iran as problematic. Iran, if you look at the numbers with it, there are no clear-cut links to terrorism. If you look at the numbers, if you look at Israel founded Hamas. Hamas is actually declared as a terrorist organization. There is nothing. The only thing we find linked with Iran is basically being anti-imperialistic. That means that basically you're against intervention. There's really nothing wrong with that, and that's pretty much it. Except if you're in this idea of the world order, everyone else should be for that idea of actually every country being for their own sovereignty, and any other country attacking a country without just cause, without being attacked first, should actually be for this, not against it. And when you see that, you should be really questioning why a country should be against the idea of anti-imperialism from that aspect. Now, if you like this with it, like the video, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell, and continue watching. I'll be back tomorrow, Monday, for my next video. Thank you. Bye.